Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Caregiving Gen X Style. I'm Steve Mullen.
And I'm Jennifer Mullen.
Planning is one of those things that becomes more and more difficult as you get deep into your caregiving journey. Sometimes you can only look one day ahead. Many days, you're just trying to keep your head above water, so putting together any kind of organized plan gets pushed aside. But if you put down all of your caregiving information in one place, it can be a very valuable document. In this episode, we'll talk with a guest who has created templates for us to get started on that project and has tips on how to get the conversation started. But first, we're going to break format just a little bit here. I wanted to talk real quick about a getaway we had. Just a couple of weeks ago, we managed to get away for our 30th anniversary, so happy anniversary to us.
Happy anniversary to us.
Yeah. So it was a crazy week. This is how it all went. We started out, we left our home. We stopped off in Pennsylvania and stayed overnight at a really, really cool bed and breakfast. Mm-hmm. We found the locals bar, imbibed.
Jennifer found the locals bar.
We imbibed just a little bit too much, particularly Jennifer.
I woke up the next morning with a couple of new Facebook friends.
Yes, and she couldn't remember them.
It took me a moment to remember who they were.
So then we left there and drove up to upstate New York, where we found a really, really awesome resort called Mohonk Mountain House.
It was amazing.
We stayed there for 5 nights, had an amazing time. You know, you look out one side of the building, you're looking at a mountain lake. You look out the other side of the building, you're looking at the Hudson Valley and mountains. What more could you possibly ask for?
The website says discover the magic of Mohonk, and I think we did.
We did. The food was amazing. The activities were great. The spa, Jennifer was there for basically 2 full days.
Yep.
I enjoyed the golf course. It was great. So after 5 nights, we drove all the way back home. Took us about 9 hours. Dumped out our dirty clothes and put new clean clothes back in. And then first thing the next morning, we left to go to where our son goes to college because it was parents' weekend. And then we tailgated for a little while, went out with our son's girlfriend's parents for the evening and you know, just enjoyed hanging out with them for a little bit, went to bed. And then the next morning, Jennifer, how's your mom?
So Sunday morning, I wake up to a text from my brother letting me know that he and Gagi were in the emergency room, that she had been having chest pains. I was supposed to be heading straight from that visit to a work trip for a couple of days. And, you know, thankfully I have a very understanding work environment and had to bail out of that and hightail it back home to get to the emergency room to see how Gagi was doing. And that was the start of a 5-day hospital stay. Yeah, 5-day hospital stay.
That's right, yes.
So kicked in, you know, my brother and I have this sort of down to a science, kicked into
kicked in the emergency plan.
The emergency plan, sharing who was going to be there at what times of day. Yes, she's in the hospital and she is being cared for. But if there is one thing that we have learned over the years, it is that it is critical for there to be a second set of ears when doctors and nurses are coming in the room, and, you know, critical to be there to advocate for her. So, you know, thus the reason some people might think we're a little crazy. But, you know, we pretty much cover not quite 24/7 when she's in the hospital, but pretty close.
And we've talked about this. I mean, I think some friends of ours have probably looked at us and said, you stay there all day long? Why? Why? It's the hospital. Why do you need to? But we've seen what happens sometimes with people who don't have family members there.
Yeah.
They tend to get ignored. And a lot of times when they're elderly people, the doctor comes in, speaks to them. They don't absorb any of it. Yeah. So nobody knows what's going on.
Yeah, both of our moms. I mean, listen, I don't mean this in a critical way, but they are 85 years old, you know, processing quick, complex information, you know, that's a little challenging for them.
And my mother does it too. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
With her, sometimes it's actually a hearing problem, but
right.
You know, she does it too, believe me.
But, you know, they're not feeling their best, and the doctors are in and out very quickly. And some of them, you know, they speak doctor language, and, you know.
And they wear masks, which I'm glad they do.
Sometimes. Yeah, not all the time anymore. But
I'm glad they do, though. But the fact of the matter is, particularly when there's a hearing problem, my mother can't really hear them or understand them if she can't see their lips.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Anyway, so that began what has now been we're rounding out 2 weeks and still going. We did get Gagi home after 5 days, but she is not, it wouldn't be safe to leave her alone. So now my brother and I are on 24/7 shifts with one another. So the week that she was in the hospital, I really was able to just telework from the hospital. So I would set up camp during the day and have my laptop, work from there, and then he would come and relieve me later in the afternoon and stay through the evening. And then once we got her home, we kind of switched because I really did need to get back to the office if at all possible. So he's doing days and I'm doing, I'm trying to get back there by like 4:00 in the afternoon and stay through the night and then head back to the office at, 9-ish the next morning. I am grateful. I had a break this weekend. Our son actually was home for his fall break. So
yeah, his parents' weekend last weekend. It's fall break.
No, it was 2 weekends ago.
Haven't we seen enough of him?
It was 2 weeks. No, we can never see enough of him. I feel like we've
seen enough of him.
He's in the other room.
He's giving me a look.
Yeah, he's giving. Just for the record, Jackson, your father is the one who said that, not me. Anyway, so yeah, now we're headed into, so then, yes, my brother was days, I was nights, and then I've had a couple of days at home while our son has been home, which has been awesome, and to sleep in my own bed. Man, the bed at my mom's apartment is not fantastic. So my body was feeling it by the end of the week. That's the other thing too. We're all getting a little bit older and can take its toll on you for sure. But I'm feeling rested and rejuvenated as we sit here and record this. I'm about to head back over. And, I've got all my work clothes planned out for the week. I've done laundry. I've repacked.
You have your plan.
I do. I have my plan.
It just plays right into this episode for sure.
And, we've talked about this before too. So it's not, we're not yet comfortable where she can be left alone, mostly at night, left alone. By the end of this past week, there are periods of time it's safe for her to be by herself. So for example, speaking of self-care, I've tried to get out for about 45 minutes each evening to take a nice brisk walk and get out, get some fresh air. And that has been very helpful. So reminder to anyone out there, even if you're staying with someone for an extended period of time, if they get to the point where they can, safely be on their own for a little while, take advantage of it. She would basically nap while I was taking walks.
Which isn't a bad thing.
Which is not a bad thing. And I'm hopeful, knock on wood, I'm hopeful that this next week we'll see more improvement and, you guys can
start easing out a little bit.
Yeah, I think we probably have at least another week of overnight stays being necessary, but it's starting to get a little tiny bit easier.
And while you've been gone, I caught up with a lot of movies that you want nothing to do with.
Yeah, yep, yeah.
I was a little behind on my superhero movies.
Yeah.
So I got caught up.
I've been binge watching a show on Netflix, and the way I've been doing that is, again, especially the first week home from the hospital, Mom was pretty tired. So I also was recognizing that most likely I was going to be up a couple of times in the middle of the night with her, when she needed to go to the bathroom. So I was trying to be mindful of really putting myself to bed early. So, I would go back in the bedroom at, like 7:30.
Yeah.
And I'd sit and I'd watch a show on my phone and I would try to force myself. It didn't take much forcing. I'd try to get to sleep pretty early so that, I could sort of compensate for the being up in the middle of the night.
And there were multiple times in the evening I'd be sitting here watching a movie and say, oh, I want to text Jennifer about this. Oh, no, she's asleep by now.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Yeah.
It's 8:30. She's asleep.
Yeah. Now, if you wanted to text me at 2:00 in the morning, most likely I would have been awake.
No, I would have been asleep for that.
Yeah.
Yep. So I mentioned we just had our 30th anniversary. Yep. Again, happy anniversary to us. I'd also like to point out that the day this episode comes out is Jennifer's birthday. So happy birthday to her.
Thanks.
You don't even know that. You don't even know what day it is.
I really don't know what day it is. And I literally keep forgetting. We usually do, family celebrations. We're all out on our deck. Everybody, my brother and his husband come over and Gagi comes over and the kids, if they're able, are home and we do, family celebration. And this year it's just, I haven't even been able to think about it. It's gonna pass. I wasn't even really thinking about the fact that it's my birthday, but yeah.
Well, happy birthday to you.
Thanks. Happy birthday to me.
So before we get started on the episode, we did have a quick shout out for a listener. Melanie sent us an email. She says our podcast has been a great companion for her 5-hour road trips to see her uncle and to take care of him. Melanie, I'm glad we could help pass the time with you. I hope you don't run out of episodes anytime soon.
So she also had a suggestion for us, which is that if Caregiving Gen X style ever ends, that we should launch a marriage podcast.
Really?
That could be interesting.
That could be interesting.
Did I just hear our son chuckle from the other room? I think I did.
Yeah, I think you probably did.
What does that mean, Jackson?
He says nothing.
Nothing.
So, yeah, thank you, Melanie, for reaching out to us. I'm glad you're enjoying it, and I'm glad we can keep you company. So, as we move on to the interview portion of the show, I did want to point out, because of Jennifer being obviously very, very busy with Gagi, she was not able to be here when this interview was done, so I did it solo. So you will not hear...
We'll see how this goes.
The wonderful Jennifer on this episode.
I have faith in you.
Rather, on the interview. But we're talking about making caregiving plans. Creating a caregiving plan is key to making your job as a caregiver as easy as possible. Our guest for this episode has started a nonprofit organization with a goal of helping us create those plans. Joining us for this episode is Richard Wexler. He's the CEO of A Plan to Age, which is a plan, the number 2, age, which launched this past summer. The organization's website provides information, plans, and resources for individuals who are actively caring for others or anticipate caregiving being part of their future. Richard, welcome to Caregiving Gen X Style.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it.
So we always ask our guests about their parents, but you had quite the caregiving journey with your parents and your in-laws. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's quite a story. So 20 years ago, living in California, working in Silicon Valley, married later, 2 small kids, 4 parents, all in their 80s. My wife and I think, well, they're doing great. So not sure what's going to happen when something eventually happens, but that's not now. Then all of a sudden in the summer of 2005, phone starts ringing and we wind up getting 4 phone calls and all 4 aren't doing great. They're very ill. So
all at the same time?
3 at the same time and the 4th one to come after that. Yep.
Oh my goodness.
So we started this journey of caregiving. And the crazy part, obviously we had no idea how long that was going to last. And it lasted 14 years until the final parent passed at 96 in 2019. So it was insane. It was, any word you want to put around it. And we, like probably just about all people in this country, had never really talked about it, didn't have any type of plan put together. And then all of a sudden we're caring. And I tell people, I'm kidding, but I tell people, look, we're special. We got all 4. Most people get 1, but it was, it was something.
Yeah, that's quite a lot, believe me. Jennifer and I deal with 2 moms, and that seems like an awful lot most days.
Yeah, it's my wife was hands-on care. I came out of the software industry, so the terminology I used then and still use, I was the project manager. So I oversaw our family, my wife, myself, our 2 small children who were part of the care as well, and then all 4 of our parents. And my job was to make sure that all worked. We somehow communicated. We found finances. We found resources and everything we needed to keep moving forward.
Right. So tell us a little bit more about yourself. I know you've told us a little bit, but tell us some more about yourself and the organization, A Plan to Age.
Sure. So we're about 6 months into this journey. I'm still working in Silicon Valley. I realize I can barely spell the word care. I leave what I'm doing. I start my own company, my first company, Points of Life. I realize I better figure this out. Google was a lot different 20 years ago, but I start reading everything I possibly can. And then about 6 months into that adventure, a gentleman shows up at my office and says, "Look, you're an attorney by training. You're good on your feet. Have you learned anything?" And I said, "Well, I hope so." And he said, "Well, get out there and start educating people about what it means to age and what it means to need care." And I kind of looked at him and said, "What?" And I did. And I started educating all over Northern California where I lived, standing in front of thousands and thousands of people. And about 6 months later, the guy showed up in my office again and said, "Okay, young man, go national." And I said, "What again?" And for the last 20 years, I've been educating nationally about the complexities of aging and care. When COVID hit, moved most of what I was doing online, but that has kept me extremely busy.
Well, I imagine you're seeing more and more interest in this as the boomers are aging. And the boomers, some of them are parents to Gen Xers. Some of them, some of us have parents that are from the generation before. But there are, literally more and more old people out there.
Yeah, I talk about, and all these facts I talk about. I'm 72 now. The oldest boomers are turning 80. It's no more yo-yos and hula hoops. I mean, we're in a different stage in our life. And yes, you're correct. It was a lot different 20 years ago and then 15 years ago and 10 years ago as compared to what it is today. And people, you just have to look around and see how many people are aging. And the numbers, and I know you know the numbers, there's over 100 million people in this country now that are over 50 years of age.
Mm-hmm. It's nuts. So on your website, you first suggest if you're making a plan that you have the family conversation. Your website provides some checklists to get that started. What should that conversation be about?
Sure. This is something I've been talking about for the 20 years. So when Peter Ross, the CEO of Senior Helpers, and I put this website together, really trying to think about, okay, what do people need to understand? We want them to do things a lot differently than my wife and I did. So this family conversation, it's something that most families, just about all families, need to have and don't, unfortunately. And when we counsel people, and I've talked to so many people over the years, let's put a scenario together where there's a couple different siblings, brothers and sisters, sisters and brothers, whatever it may be. Is it a situation where we want all of them picking up the phone and calling mom? No. We want them to talk first and then to figure out, okay, who has the best relationship with mom? Is that the alpha dog in the family? Not necessarily. That may be the baby, the youngest one, who has the closest relationship. So when this conversation starts and actually takes place, it may be that youngest sibling. Obviously, if you're the only child, it's you, but that's the one that's picking up the phone.
And, well, we did a whole episode on different types of caregivers, and we call that the primary caregiver. And I guess a lot of times, it just falls by default to the one who still lives nearby.
That's very true. And I've dealt with that a lot over the last 20 years, some good, some bad. The sister lives 5 miles down the street from mom and dad. The brother may be across the country. The brother may be extremely wealthy. The brother doesn't want to get involved, doesn't want to help. And it all falls on his sister. And just like you said, the main reason is she lives close to where mom or dad or both of them live.
And, we've also talked about, one of the best situations you can get into when you have multiple siblings involved, whether it's 2, 3, 4, more than that, is if each one of them takes a little piece of it and owns it.
Exactly. So, and obviously things are different than they were 20 so on many years ago with the internet. I mean, I've worked with families, maybe a sister or brother is working in Europe or working in Asia or wherever, and they go, what can I do? Mom's in pick a city, Cincinnati, and I'm in Paris. Well, maybe that individual is pretty good with numbers, and that individual obviously can use the internet. And if mom or dad are struggling from a financial situation, dealing with that money for different reasons, potentially that brother or sister, irrespective of where they live, can be doing that for the parent.
And you suggest having this conversation before the elderly parent, the elderly loved one actually needs help. Is that right?
We would love, it's difficult, but we would love for families to understand. That's part of our mission, the education around this, to try to get families to understand how important it is to plan before a serious health event happens to mom, dad, in-laws, grandparents. So yes, we want them talking about this soon. And we're coming up to a difficult time of year in that a lot of families will go home for the holidays. And probably the busiest time in senior care is actually right after the holidays, when someone's gone home, they've seen mom or dad, they see the difficulty possibly one of them has walking. Maybe dad calls a son by his brother's name.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to wait till that point. We're hoping that this family understands when mom and dad are still doing really well. Maybe they're in their early 70s, kids are 25, 30 years younger. You start having this conversation, and you may ask about this. We even have tips for people of how you start the conversation.
And I think that's great. What about, so this happened in our lives. I had started to notice my mother's mobility was going downhill, and she'd had back problems and she was having more trouble walking. And I brought up to her, maybe it might be a good time to think about moving into assisted living where you'd have a lot of help. And she looked me right in the eye and shut it down and said, absolutely not. I'm staying in this house as long as I can. And we've talked about this on the show. She literally could not stay in her house one more day. She ended up having a pretty bad back problem and just couldn't walk anymore. So she literally could not be independent for one single day more. How do you have that conversation when they don't want to talk about it?
It's really challenging. And normally, as I said a couple minutes ago, I've told people, they've asked me over the years, well, how do we start this conversation with mom, dad? And I tell them the last thing you want to do is pick up the phone, mom answers and go, Mom, we got to talk. No, she's going to shut you right down. But what we found, talked to some psychologists about this as well, that when a child, irrespective of age, your parents may be doing really well into their late 80s, and you may be quite a bit older yourself. But when a child calls a parent and tells them they need some help or will ask for advice, what we've found is most parents tend to sit up straighter and go, Johnny, how can I help? What's going on?
So then what?
So then that hopefully leads you to start the conversation. So let's say the child's name is Johnny, and that child could be 50, 55, 60 years of age, hopefully younger, and gives his wife a name, Becky. Becky and I were just wondering, Mom, as you're getting a little bit older, where would you like to live? And she's probably going to say exactly what you heard, Steve. I want to stay here. And she may say this phrase or not. I want to stay here and die with my boots on.
Right.
But it starts the conversation.
And I think, the only thing I could do in that particular instance, honestly, was just set it aside and then bring it up again later. And I did bring it up again later, and I didn't have any more success than I did the first time. And really, eventually, it just, it's the problem solved itself because she realized there was no way she could stay in her house by herself anymore. She couldn't walk. She needed a lot of help. And she's in a good assisted living now, and that was the good solution. But you have on the website a bunch of checklists to try to put together this comprehensive family care plan. What is in that plan?
So what we're trying, we start with everything we talked about, having the right sibling pick up the phone, asking for advice. We normally start by asking questions like that. Mom, where do you want to live? Mom, if something were to happen to you, who do you want to care for you? She's probably going to say you, your sister, someone like that. She's probably going to say that she wants to stay at home. Then you start asking more gentle questions about Mom, about the home, about the setup. And what you're trying to do is kind of get to where you were able to get maybe a little bit sooner. And you know the home, you know the condo she's in, you know the house that she's in, you know that it was built so many years ago and maybe all the bedrooms and the bathroom is upstairs. You know the situation, but you're trying to kind of work with all these questions so Mom starts to understand, I am having a little difficulty walking. And going up the stairs is challenging. And she's thinking, when I have to use the restroom, getting up to the second floor is difficult. So you start talking about that. Then there's a myriad of subjects that you want to talk about. And I tell people this conversation is not one. It may be many. And we have this care plan online. You can fill it out. It guides you through the questions. Then when you fill it out, you can download it. It's a living document. And then you may only get it partially filled out through one or two conversations. And the more conversations you have, the more information you can start nicely asking. This is a really tough subject, and I know you've dealt with it on the podcast about the financials and what does care actually cost. And is Mom and Dad set up to make those payments? Or do they have other vehicles they can use? Or might they be looking at compensation help from you and your brothers and sisters? You're also looking at the legal aspects. And again, this may take many conversations until you get to that point. Have they done an estate plan? Has it been updated? If they haven't, do they understand the consequences of dying intestate? And again, you're not going to talk about this initially, but hopefully through all the conversations, you get into some very important subject matter that you want in this plan.
So I guess the idea is get started with the simple stuff.
Yes.
And then hope that leads to the more serious conversations.
Exactly. Because I tell people, when you eventually do wind up taking care of a parent, however deep that care is, it's going to be extremely challenging. And the more you can have planned, it'll never be easy, but the easier it will be. My business partner, Peter, talks all the time about, a family's going to go nice vacation to the Bahamas. They're going to go to Hawaii. They're going to plan the convertible they rent. They're going to plan all the restaurants they go to. They're going to plan all the beaches they go to, but they won't talk about this.
And do you think there's a point where it's just too late for this conversation?
No. And I've told that to people. So you got the phone call. Now you may get the phone call, the text. Mom had a bad fall. Maybe it's your brother or sister sending you that text. She's in X hospital. She's in the ER. They think she broke something. They think it's her hip. So, you're going to fly out and go see mom. And by the time you get there, she may still be in the ER. She may be in a room. Is it too late? No. I mean, now in our website, what we did, we put together two pieces. The plan piece, everything we're talking about, plus resources nationwide to help you if you're planning. We also put together the crisis piece. Mom has already broken her hip. Now, what do we do? But you still want to have that conversation with mom. You still need to find out. She's probably going to be in the hospital 2, 3, 4 days, probably go through surgery, probably have to go to skilled nursing for 3, 4 weeks. After that, then what? What does she want? Who's going to take care of her? Is she going to move? How much is that going to cost? How is it going to get paid for? All these things still need to be talked about. Obviously, a lot more challenging once an actual event has taken place.
And I think, our listeners know that I went through a scenario that was very, very similar to what you just said. As I mentioned, my mother had this back problem, and it was a spinal cord problem that led to her not being able to use her right leg. She had to go in for surgery. They hoped they could fix it. They hoped they could give her mobility back. It didn't work. And she was in a rehab institute, a really nice one. And they basically said, no, she's not going to walk anymore. We need to send her to a place that is going to, more like a skilled nursing situation and someplace that can teach her how to live like this. And by the way, she can't be independent anymore. That's it. End of story. So yeah, we went through this and my mother was involved in that conversation, and she accepted that she couldn't go back home by herself anymore. And I guess we kind of did an accelerated version of what you're talking about.
Very much so. And we're just, when we built this and Peter and I talked about it, we realized most people, as I said, have never had this conversation. I get it. It's not a fun conversation. And it's not fun to think about grandparents or mom and dad in this position. But someone that's gone through it, obviously 4 times, and didn't have any type of plan put together, it is extremely difficult. Because I look at families and I say, where we are right now in 2025, this is what care costs. If you want to bring someone in the home, this is what you're looking at. Roughly $40 an hour on average around the country, 50 in the larger cities. The absurd number is when you start talking about the monthly fee. You're in one city, mom's in another. You can't take care of her personally, but she needs 24-hour care, and she will not leave the home. It's only about $29,000 a month. And realistically, how many people in this country can afford that? And then you look at moving her to an assisted living, average around the country, just to get a room, and rent that room is about $5,000 a month. Then you add care on top of it. So I look at families and say, if this isn't workable, you're going to have two choices. A very small percentage of people in this country are going to look at mom and go, Mom, thanks for the good life. Bye. Most,
No.
most are going to have to, and I know you know this, it's usually the female going to look at their spouse, their partner, and say their kids, their job, and say, I'm going to have to move away from this, move back in with mom. And a lot of people, unfortunately, don't realize how long the care for mom may last.
And, the other option is basically you're traveling back and forth.
Yes.
We mentioned earlier in this episode, there was a listener email and she flies 5 hours to go take care of her uncle.
Yeah. I mean, and I met those people, and the people that when I was in California that would fly, had the funds and would fly back and forth to the East Coast to take care of mom. That isn't most people. So
right.
they're
Most
going to
people
have.
can't. I actually said fly. I meant she drove, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, and even if driving and so on, that's why back to the plan. Why it's so important. Okay, mom wants to stay there. Mom's not going to move. This is what we're looking at. How do we make adjustments in our life? If she were to trip at the grocery store tomorrow, break a hip, what are we going to do to make that work?
So, we're talking all about planning here. In your opinion, what's the most important plan a person can put into place to ensure that their elderly years, whether it's theirs or their parents or an elderly loved one of any kind, is as stress-free as possible?
I think it goes back to what we were talking about. It is communication, or it is that communication. So maybe, and there are a lot of people in this situation, they don't have kids, but communicate. Do you belong to a church? Do you belong to a synagogue? Communicate with someone there. Do you have close neighbors? Do you have close friends? You need people around you to understand what you and I were just talking about, and maybe have similar conversations if you're close enough with them. So when, and for most people, something does happen at some point, there can be adjustments made, again, whether this individual is going to stay at home, whether this individual is going to move someplace. If that isn't workable, if that's not affordable, then who is going to care for this individual?
And finally, so tell us where people can find all this information. And I understand you're doing some quarterly Zoom calls as well. Tell us about those.
Sure. So we do a lot of education. We do what we call the National Conversation on Aging and Care. We have one coming up. It's on October 14th. It's at 1 o'clock Eastern time in the afternoon. It's on Zoom. All this information is on our website, which I'll give you in a second. And the topic for that conversation on the 14th is over 10 ways to pay for care. What concerns me, I'll talk to individuals that work in the senior care industry, and I'll ask them, how many ways can a client pay for care? And they'll tell me 2 or 3 different ways. There are over 10 different ways to figure this out and make payment. So I tell people, you work in the senior care industry, you touch the senior care industry, or if you're simply alive, it's something you need to understand and truly understand all these different ways where you can find it. And all the information that we've been talking about, Steve, is on our website, aplan2age.org. And as you said, the 2 in there is the number 2, aplan2age.org.
Well, you mentioned October 14th. So that's the day to our listeners, if you're listening to this, the day it came out, Today is October 14th. So we will have a link, of course, to the website. In addition, we'll have a link to where people can find this Zoom call. That'll all be in the show notes. If you're listening to this in the morning while you're drinking your coffee or heading off to work and you have some time, definitely check that out. Richard Wexler, CEO of A Plan to Age, thanks so much for being on the show. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve. Very much appreciate it.
And thanks to everyone for listening to this episode. If you want to get in touch with us, you have a question, a comment, an inquiry, if you just tell us, how are your parents? How is your mom? How is your dad? How is your uncle? How is whoever you're taking care of? You can email us at caregivinggenxstyle@gmail.com. You can send us a text or a voicemail at 804-723-1221. You can find us on Twitter or Blue Sky. The handle on both of them is at Gen X Caregiving. We're also on Facebook. Just look at the show notes and you'll find a link to Facebook. That'll make it sure you get to the right Facebook page. We hope to hear from you soon. Have a great day.